Bien, bonjour.
Hello, everyone. It's really nice of you to come so early. I would like to say hello to the 300,000 people who are following us online. That's actually the novelty of this edition. I would like to thank the Minister of the Economy, the man behind the economy of this country, Bruno Le Maire. We should have a round of applause, a big round of applause for Mr. Le Maire. It looks like a Comintern meeting in 1936, actually. We have 45 minutes ahead of us. You all know everyone. The idea is quite straightforward. For 1 day and a half, we've been handling with a lot of enthusiasm and the title of this edition is How to Succeed in Reinventing the World. And we also have short-term visions. That's actually the hard thing, is that we have to strike the right balance between the two. And what is stimulating is that we wanted to actually turn towards Mr. Le Maire as an eminent figure of reflection and literature. And we would like to get out of the traditional economy to ask him the following question as a start. If we were to reinvent the world, what is the project? So we are trying to get back to the optimism that we had 6 months ago. Maybe we should not reinvent the world, but try to instill some happiness again in the world. That would actually make it easier. The rounds of applause, you can keep them for afterwards, because I'm sure it will be amazing. And I'm going to give the floor to Bruno. On this first question, how can we actually reinvent the world? What does it mean, reinventing the world? And then we'll have our friend Françoise and everywhere else.
Thank you, Jean-Hervé. Thank you all. I'm not sure that in the Comintern in 1936, people were working on Sunday morning at 8:30. I'm not sure about that. So, thank you. I'm very grateful to be in such a large number so early on a Sunday morning. I'll spare you a long introduction on the reinvention of the world, reinventing or not. The world is changing anyway, and the world has changed significantly in the last few years, and then the process is accelerating. Things go in the right direction, good, and we also tend to forget that. I would like to mention a couple of evolutions that go in the right direction. We had a COVID crisis, as you know, pandemic, and we found a vaccine against the pandemics in a couple of months. It is an amazing performance. So there will be technological and scientific evolution in the world which are quite remarkable. We are actually, especially thanks to the new generation, we're becoming aware of the climate urgency. So this is a positive evolution 5 years ago, 10 years ago actually. Those were part of the little catchphrases that we put at the end of a speech, but nobody really was so aware, or it wasn't obvious for everybody to fight this climate change or mitigate climate change. We've been dealing with the most dramatic financial crisis in 2020, and instead of having a divided Europe, we decided to have a common debt for the European continent. This is a very positive trend, and as always, there is a sort of a shifting. There are things that we would like to wish and to hope for, and there is also the pullback, the regression, sometimes unexpected, from continent where we would expect something else. The decision from the U.S. Supreme Court on abortion is the worst pullback of a Western democracy in a century. And we have to understand what it means. What makes the strength of liberal democracies? It's not their economy. Others do as well as we do, like China. It's not their scientific knowledge. Others are replacing us. Asia, China again. It's not our military might. Unfortunately, Russia has shown us that she has a military power similar to us. What makes the difference between liberal democracies and the rest of the world is the acknowledgement of individual rights. And when an individual right as fundamental as abortion is challenged by one of the largest, if not the largest, liberal democracy of the world, it's the very spirit of Tocqueville and of liberal democracy and the US democracy which is damaged, crashed, because we French look for reasons to fight. Well, we must assert individual rights, we must reinforce the right to abortion, and we have to make it a reason for collective reason and insert it into the French Constitution. So I'll mention two other regressions in this shifting of the world. First one is, of course, the return of war within Europe. I mean, here, for a large part of you believe in Europe. Here, a large number of participants fight for Europe to be a peace continent, and unfortunately, we see war coming back in Ukraine today, and possibly in Europe as we know it tomorrow. So, we should not handle lightly Vladimir Putin's threats. And the third regression that worries me, and I'm saying this in front of Lionel Zinzou, the divergence we always fight for with the fight against with President Macron. You know, the divide between Europe and Africa is increasing. This difference between the North and the South was narrowing for the last few decades. Poverty, famine, economic disorder and chaos regress. COVID was the first attack where we were putting 10 billions of euros to protect our economies, while African states were not able to invest the same amounts of money. And they, again, you know, hit by famine, by lack of wheat, by lack of farming agricultural products. And I want you, all of you, to become aware of the absolute necessity there is to continue our support to the economic development in Africa, to fight against climate change, Africa being one of the first victims, and to establish the European-African partnership and priority of the coming century. And on all those topics, Jean-Hervé, France has something to say. And it is the only one to be able to say it, because all of you, as French citizens, the inheritors of the Lumière who fought for all the human rights, and you are the inheritors of such movements. And at a time when the country like the US can no longer fight for its value and is becoming an antagonistic country, we French people have to give the image of a people which is united around those fundamental values of liberty, equality, brotherhood. So we're so close to the African continent. We have an entwined history with African countries. We have to make the fight against the fight against the difference between Africa and Europe. We are a scientific nation. We've been able to create renewable energy. We have a nuclear power capability, which is essential. We should not be led by false ideas and obscurantism, and say that nuclear energy, science, knowledge, innovation are the best response to the climate change.
Je me suis trompé tout à l'heure, c'est parce que c'est quand même plus vivace que ça.
Comintern is actually 1939, actually. I forgot about that. I just wanted to mention this. So let's talk about things that are closer to us. As a great democratic nation, we need to have a healthy economy. We know that there are a certain number of things that could be of concern. We've seen that in the French economy, the industry. We've had also seen recently that they were not, that they didn't have the necessary weapons to address the problems in terms of import, for instance. We have also the energy transition, you've said it. We have to succeed, but that actually requires significant investments. Also the education system, the information coming from the school system, from About the children's capacities, it seems that it's quite of concern. We have not raised the bar in the level in terms of education, and so it seems that we have quite straightforward challenges such as the energy transition, the industry, and the education. But there are also constraints in the present time: inflation, purchasing power. Can we manage both? Isn't there a contradiction between satisfying the meeting today's constraints? I'm thinking about everything you do to maintain the purchasing power, which is quite ambitious, but it's also costly, and also the long-term vision. If we actually address the short term, actually we hamper the long-term vision, because we'll have too many debts and we won't have the capacity to deal with the long-term projects.
A country always needs an orientation, a heading, and what is essential. To understand what is essential for me, what is essential, and I've said it several times, and I won't dwell on the topic, is education. And I would say education in the broad meaning of the word, education and culture. We must find ourselves again. We are a nation based on culture, on reasoning, a nation of balance, equilibrium, of moderation. And when I see the extremes which are on the front stage right now, who say just about anything on every topic, who ignore science, reason, we are shifting away from what we are as a people. We're shifting away from what we are as a nation. Education, culture must be our main long-term objective. The only one, the only one that counts, but because a non-educated, non-cultured nation which has cut its cultural roots is no longer a nation. This is my long-term objective. Then, of course, we have to deal with short-term issues. We have to think ahead, like Pascal, short-term, and behind that of the long-term. My long-term one is education, culture, and the purchasing power. Purchasing power is absolute priority. But when you drive when you run around in France, I did walk, and you have employees from a Liber factory in Colmar. They build magnificent civil engineering machines. I said, we don't come to work because it costs too much for us. You're very happy, Mr. Le Maire, with your story as a factory and so, but give me the 150 euros I need every month to come to get my car and come to the factory. Yeah, my absolute priority is that there should be a text on the purchasing power of the population that will make it possible to help those who really need it. And I will be very clear, those who really need it. We've started by fighting against inflation with a general coverage. Everybody enjoyed it. Many of you are here, actually. But tomorrow, this will no longer be the case. We need to target supports to those who really need it in terms of efficacy, justice, and to pay attention to public finance. 18 centimes of euro for liter of fuel to everybody. But tomorrow, as of October 1st, we will target fuel support to those who have to take their cars to work and who are part of the modest, the least favored categories of the nation or the lower middle class. It is a political choice, difficult to argue for, but it is coherent with our working policy, our labor policy. Now, second, employment. We have to target full employment here. In X, everybody followed at the same speeches. We can make products. Our factories can run, our companies can function, our restaurants can open, hotels are full, but we can't find the labor, the manpower. It's quite, don't choose the word you like, but it's, you have so much employment, we're not yet at full employment, and so many companies which are looking for employees. So clearly, at in September, we'll have to deal with this as an absolute priority. The shortage of manpower is the key urgency point to be dealt with in the coming weeks. The second urgency, which comes just after purchasing power. Third one, and I will be clear on that subject, no ambiguity, is to restore the health of our public finances. And I'm saying in front of Jean-Claude Trichet, who clearly agrees with me. We have to restore public finances. It's an issue of independence, freedom, and sovereignty. I said that we've reached a red line, you know. Well, basically, the financing conditions today are no longer the one that existed yesterday. Yesterday, as a Minister of Finance, I could raise money of 10 years at 0%. So sometimes I even had negative interest. Mr. Le Maire, we lend you money. We pay you to lend you money at one stage. Now it's me, us, who have to pay. Inflation will multiply the debt, the charge of the debt, you know, and this is it's going to cost us 12 billion euros. Do you think we can go on like this? No, it's absolutely not. So each euro will count, and we can't do just about everything. So I would rather say it as clearly as this before we look at the text on the purchasing power in the National Assembly. We'll have to go even further to restore public finances. We know we don't have to pay attention to each euro. You have to target. Patrick Artus, a great economist, said with full employment we will solve 90% of the problems of France. I share this appreciation, but we have to reduce expenditures. And in the finance project 2023, we have to start looking at the expenditures we will reduce. And since I've been a Minister of Economy and Finance for quite a while now, you're all aware of that. So let's change radically our method to reduce expenditures. The Minister of Finance would come by saying, okay, this is a list of expenditures we're going to reduce. Well, you know, you can barely open your mouth and is being shut down. So this cannot, not possible, too dangerous, too sensitive to this, to that, you know. Take your expenditure reduction proposal and long live new expenditures. This is the way it goes each time. But this time I will say it, we don't have a choice. We have to engage ourselves into the reduction of public expenditures. Concrete proposals in my new methods. Well, first and foremost, it will be the members of parliament who will deal with us. And no longer the government. I'm going to go on the holiday. I'm going to go to the sun, on the beach, and I'll rest. And our friends from the French Parliament will get to work, and especially with the Danielle Labaronne, who came up with this proposal for the majority, that the members of Parliament in the National Assembly and in the Senate organize a task force that will rethink public expenditures, because what we need is not just like €1 here and €1 there. It's to think in depth our main choices of public policies. Are they legitimate? Should we continue funding them or should we stop doing it? And I think the only ones to do so in depth, to examine public expenditures, are the representatives of the French people, the members of the parliament. So therefore, here you go, you know, come up and have proposal on this topic. Second step of the method, we at one stage will have to make a decision. We have to establish a dialogue, exchange, they will do so, and we will come up with new proposals, and then after that, we should, in September, before the finance draft law of 2023, we should have sort of a public finance convention. Let's look together with the parliament and the governments what choices we will make, always in the dialogue, in consultation. You know, the public finance convention, which will make it possible to redefine the main choices in French public policies, and therefore to start engage expenditures which will not be understood as a sort of penny saving, but really as a redefinition of French public spending. And then we have to push aside all taboos, of non-assignment of revenues, which is in golden letter in the entry of the Minister of Finance in France. Well, let's remove this board and say, okay, well, possibly, after all, in view of all the challenges today, we need to assign some revenues, or, you know, one, but Benoît Curé, who was there, knows the topic. He knows that this is essential. I propose, for example, and I've done it, and I say it again, that all tax revenues coming from a tax on fossil fuels, gas, oil, diesel, whatever, should be directly oriented towards the fight against climate change and energy transition. it will be a revolution. I grant you that, but because of what is coming up, there will be tremendous changes, acceleration of global warming, war in Europe, problems to finance a certain number of states, or financial problems for certain states. The debt is back, so we need to have imagination and to be somehow revolutionary. But trust me, I am a revolutionary, even though I don't look like one.
I would like to follow up on an environmental question in a matter of international relations with a question that would be very concrete. Today, our map has been reshifted on terms of commodities when you go from combustion engine to electric cars, when you use lithium and cobalt and so on. So we have a real change in terms of international relationships, especially with China. And we have short-term vision with this industrial transformation. And then this reinvention of the world, this European positioning on the world map, and is also with partners that are not aligned with our positions, but are more aligned with the American positions.
Well, this is a fundamental question which I can summarize in one word: independence. When I said that we have to find ourselves as a people and as a nation, I think one of the things that will expect the turmoil in French politics is this notion of a loss of independence. We are strongly independent. It doesn't mean that we don't like the world, doesn't mean that we are not involved in European construction, but we have a French state of mind which is strongly, fiercely independent. We don't like to depend on others, and that's a good thing. First, independence has to be energy. On the Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne said it yesterday, clearly, strongly, and I share her views. Let's get ready for total shutdown of Russian gas supply. So this is the most likely option, that we therefore must accelerate our energy independence, that we should restore the stock. We refuel our stock, we should have a barge off the shore, the Le Havre, in quick times, and let's not do in 2-3 years what other nations do in 6 months. And this would be a guarantee for independence. Let's be imaginative. Let's look at what we can do when it comes to biogas, alternative energies. Let's remove all regulatory hinderings that we have when that block the development of alternative energies. And let's not listen to those who want to stop the development of energies because they will not go and explain to the French people they can no longer have a problem heating or lighting in next winter. So as we are going to be responsible for this, well, I'd rather actually, as of now, we should have a rapid decision-making spirit when it comes to energy independence, sobriety in our behavior, sobriety in our energy expenditures, development of new domains, acceleration of development of the program of new EPRs, new nuclear reactors in the coming years. This is the roadmap for independence. It combines between immediate decision, sobriety, gas supply, the reconstitution of stock, the development of alternative solutions, and long-term solutions such as the development of the design development of new nuclear reactor. Then industrial independence. In the good news that I could mention, I think the regionalization of globalization is great news, actually. At last, we are going to end 30 years of industrial delocalization or outsourcing, which were an economic mistake, a political fault, and a national rejection of our industry, because France has always been a great industrial nation, and we all, we let our industry go away. This was one of the most revolting industrial scandals of the last decades. Regionalization will make it possible to reshore French industries. Well, let's not produce T-shirts, let's be honest, but renewable on electric batteries, on automotive industry, in the automotive aeronautics, Guillaume Fauré with Airbus, which is absolutely fantastic. with the hydrogen plane that Guillaume Faury will be the first to do in Toulouse with Airbus, which has crushed Boeing, and that's a great news. So we, together with all these achievements, ensure our independence, industrial independence. Tomorrow, Choose France will take place, and Choose France will be exceptional this year. It will be a vintage year, and there will be investment that will show that France is back to its industrial and technological leadership in Europe and in the world. And trust me, you've been working on this for 2 years now. So when at last they get there, thanks to attractive tax policy, thanks to the decision by the French president for the last 5 years, we're there, we're going to make it. But it means that we have to be independent from one end to the other end, end-to-end in the chain. I remember a discussion we had with Guillaume, where all of a sudden, when there were no components, we realized that we are depending, and even managers didn't know that depended on such or such supplier of carbon, lithium, or rare material in Russia, in China, or elsewhere. So we have to do a full map of all the rare metals, all those essential components we need to guarantee our independence from one end to the other end of the chain. We got a large corporation like Eramet in metals, which can help us to win this independence. When it comes to semiconductors, there is a great company in STMicro. We call STMicro. We can rely on that. So simply, we have to map this from a political choice, and this is clear: total independence end-to-end of the strategic chains to achieve industrial performance. And when something is missing, we give ourselves the means to fill in the gap to guarantee our total independence.
I would like to revert to what you said. First of all, that's a big statement, and there's a lot of convergences. There are 2 points, however, that were mentioned many times during the different sessions as to perception and reality. The perception that our young people have is that they are completely abandoned. And we've seen the figures, it's actually huge. They feel excluded. There are a lot of people who are on the margin, in the ballpark of more than 1.5 million, which is very significant. And there's a second aspect, which is I would say, a territorial political problem. It's the fact that the young people feel that they will never have access to the normal living conditions, such as housing, for instance. What can you say about it? How can we instill trust again? And how can we have a diversified young people and make sure that they can be in good living conditions? As for the politics, it's for the nation, but also for the young people that we're doing what we're doing. That's actually the meaning of the political engagement. That's our faith. And it's a good vocation. It is our dedication. When we see that there are a lot of French young people that are disgusted with politics, that are, it hurts to hear that. And certainly that means that we don't handle it well. Our priorities are not set right. And we have to rethink our priorities and our policies. On housing, and I'm not a specialist on that subject, we've talked about public finance. There is a real paradox, because we're the country in Europe where we have more public expenditure for housing, and yet we have the worst outcomes, the worst performance. So that means that there's a problem, there's a huge discrepancy, and that actually is a good illustration of the method that I'm proposing. There's a bad one, where we just actually should cut on housing expenditure, and we give €5 on what we call the housing subsidies. And I'm not sure it's actually the right solution, you see. And then there's another method. It's to rethink the whole housing policy, to be more respectful of public expenditure, but also to be more efficient. As for the youth, 2 words that seem essential to me. First of all, everything that facilitates access to employment with perspectives that allows us to find a place in the society is a good thing. This is a situation which, this bad situation should not stay long. But there are new policies also supported by Elisabeth Borne on apprenticeship as well. With the spirit of a conqueror, this is what we've done with apprenticeship. It was actually abandoned, and now it is a path of excellence. And if there is a public expenditure which is very useful, it's the 8,000 euros that we give to the apprentices under 18 years old. That allows to SMEs, small structures, and even large corporations to hire apprentices. We have to continue with apprenticeship, and it should be a path of excellence for a long time. Mr. Minister, dear Minister, we have people in Aix taking coffee on the terrace. What is also very important to re-enchant democracy is that we give all the chances to the waiter to become also the one that will be waited upon and to have coffee. There's an expression, and we say that we can't go up the social ladder anymore. It's broken. It's so broken because there's so many difficulties. How can we actually repair it? It's a very good example, that of the waiter at a terrace. When we talk about challenges, I talked about the climate change, I talked about public expenditure, but I would like to talk about a third challenge. That's part and parcel of the challenges that we are about to face in the following weeks and months. The climate change, the public expenditure, but also labor. And I propose, just for public expenditure, just as for climate, that we should broaden our horizons. We should find a vision that would be in the French way, not with a small perspective, but a more universal approach, a broader vision. And with the question, how can labor be better compensated? And I would like to say things straightforwardly. All the companies that can should actually increase the salaries and wages of their salaried employees. They have to. Some do it. Some are doing it already. And I thank them. I see that there's less rounds of applause right now, of course, but I will repeat it. All companies that can do it, they should increase the salaries of their employees. We, as a state, we will, of course, contribute to the burden. We will revalue the business activity. We'll also give more money. And I would like to say to our friends on the right wing, we will work on the revaluation on this. We will try to accumulate labor and pension. And I will reach out to them. Second thing, we have to rethink a compensation of work. When we say that the minimum salary is actually for everyone, we should not accept that there are so many minimum salary that are actually under the official one. It actually closes up opportunities for the young. It is unacceptable that we should have so many minimum salaries that are so below the official rate. Thirdly, we have to think about the organization of labor. If there's something that I find stupid, really, and quite limited, and short-sighted, the young of today, they don't want to work, you know, that's what we say. Well, it's wrong. They want to work, but they want to organize their time in a different way. Of course, we have to think about the organization of labor, of how we work, of our working methods. In the catering, any F&B business, when you say you work 8 hours a day, I don't work 8 hours a day. I work at noon, then I work from 1 to 5, then I'm blocked during the afternoon because I have to walk around because I can't go home, and then again at 6 o'clock I work and I finish at midnight. I'm actually working 14 hours, and he's right in saying that. We should allow him to organize himself differently. And ultimately, We all want to have career perspectives. We want to evolve, to go up the social ladder. And we have talked about it. We shouldn't have on one side those who can change and those who cannot. Those who can have all the facilities, all the possibilities, those who have the best training, the best qualifications, and those that are actually, that have to stay and keep earning 1,250 euros per month, and that will never change, will never evolve. This is unacceptable. We should all have the same opportunities. We should all be able to evolve in our career, to have better qualifications, to have better training, to engage into new trades. I think we should redesign all this all together. Well, that's actually a transition to talk about capital. It was quite clear, and that has been the case for 30 years. Capitalism was rather centered, well, it's more in the US than in Europe, but it was on the obtaining of a high yield of capital. We had actually profitability above 10% when we had a null rate. This was done through relocations, as you mentioned earlier. That was actually higher than what was normally socially acceptable, more in the US, of course, than in Europe. And we have also less sharing of income between the companies and the wage earners. And it ended up with the obtention of resources in commodities and carbonated commodities that were not very costly. This has ended, but should we challenge actually the functioning of capitalism? Because unavoidably some companies do it. Most of the transition investments are done without any direct financial profitability, so as to avoid having carbon. How do you consider a reform of capitalism? We should share values, but it's also a matter of a state. How would you redefine capitalism reform? Well, actually, this is the subject of the next hour. So that means that I have to be short, right, and brief. Sure. So if I were to speak about capitalism, I would say the same thing that Churchill says about democracy. It's the worst of systems, with the exception of all the others. So it's a good thing to want to change our system, but actually in democracy it's actually all good. Capitalism remains the most efficient system, and actually it's the best system to face the challenges. But of course it has to be rethought out, reviewed as regards to the environment, because this is the first priority. And everything needs to be guided by this requirement to speed up the fight against climate change and to have energy transition. We have to rethink in the way that we want to give to the economy, and also in a deeper way. We have to rethink the system in the relationship between capital and labor. That's actually the hard core of the system. And it's obvious today that the place of work of wage earners, their contribution to decision-making processes, also the interest that they can get, but also the moral contribution that they can have, the capacity to evolve. As far as I'm regards, that's one of the greatest stakes of capitalisms. I would like to be even more concrete when I say that. For most companies, we're expecting 10–12% profitability. That's not acceptable anymore. We should not target profitabilities like this, like 10, 12, 15%. We have to make sure that we're sustainable. We need to have to make sure that employees are recognized. We need to think about energy transition. It's better to have 5% profitability, but to go over the long term, to respect the planet, and to recognize the employees rather than having 15% profitability with employees that are actually squashed. And this is how I see capitalism today. Maybe the reference to the Comintern was actually a good choice, because I can see that you have a rebellious spirit. We can give him a good round of applause.